Hello everyone, welcome to week 3. This is our instructional video. I like to do these where I kind of recap or reflect on some of the major learning that you've done and some themes and topics that I've seen come up in your discussion posts, as well as take a look ahead at what you can expect going forward this week. I'm not sure exactly what things look like on the student end on Canvas, but I have posted grades for discussion 1, and I leave quite lengthy feedback for you because that's my way of personalizing your learning, engaging in a conversation with you, and hopefully pushing you to think about a few new things. So if you're not able to see my comments in Canvas, please do let me know. I've already started looking at discussion 2, even though it's not due. You'll be seeing this on Monday. I'm making this before then, but I've already started going through and grading some of them because it looks to me like you're completed. You've made your original post and at least 2 comments to peers. So I started taking a peek at your comments on Vanessa's story for discussion post 2 so that I could reflect on that for our instructional video. And so you might see some grades popping up even though the assignment is not yet due. And that's okay. I've only graded like half of them, the ones that look to me to be done. So what I can tell is that this story truly touched you all in some way, some emotional way. It made you angry, frustrated, sad, reflective, and I think that is worth exploring because there's so many obstacles that this story illuminated for us, obstacles in the education system that we need to take a closer look at. So I'm glad we're having this conversation. Some of you noted that this really points to the huge drawback in high stakes testing when we use one assessment to determine the future of a student. Obviously, a keyword in education is triangulation, but you all notice that there's more to Vanessa than this snapshot or even this school year. Her story is one that we need to almost look at her entire education and personal life to help make some decisions that are in Vanessa's best interest. You also pointed out the need to consider multiple variables when we're looking at assessment data, and that makes me think back to page 17 in our textbook, if you remember this one. Reader and text variables besides level that impact comprehension. I think this is a great, almost like a checklist to take a look at when we're considering anything that might help us understand student performance a little better than what it seems to be at first glance. You also talked about in your discussion posts the need to consider the bigger picture of a child's learning, right? I would like to know how this manifests in her writing. I would like to know a lot about Vanessa. All I got was this 3-page story, but there's so much more that we need to know. This story also helped us see a lot of issues with our running record system, right? You all noted the difference between using an excerpt from a text to do a running record versus actually using a full-length novel or chapter book to do a running record. This also makes us think about the difference between using contrived readers to do a running record, like the Fountas and Pinnell system, versus using an authentic text. Really, we need both. We use the Fountas and Pinnell or the Teachers College system to get a benchmark on a student, but we should also in between be conferring with them with the actual books that they're reading, the full-length books. Teachers College system, the running record system, gives you an excerpt from a full-length book, whereas the Fountas and Pinnell system gives you just a contrived story, and you get the full beginning, middle, and end right there in that story to do your running record. So it's the difference between the full contrived story and medias res of an excerpt from a longer text versus conferring with the kid actually reading in an actual book. Lots of different ways that we need to get info on a student, and you pointed out that all of them are needed, right? We can't just rely on one to get the full picture of a student. We need to talk about how the language we use is really important. We level books. We don't level readers. We level books, not readers. Because what does a level really mean anyway when there's so many book features that we need to consider when making sure we're getting students a just right book. We think about, some of you pointed out how vocabulary is a major feature to consider, the content of the book. I taught gifted and talented for 7th graders, and they could be reading at a 12th grade level, but they're not ready for that content right just yet, right? So decodability, like if we say a kid can read a book, are we saying they can decode a book or they can comprehend the book? Or yes, both. I think a large portion of our non-teacher parents, like our parents and our community, they would say reading a book means being able to decode it. But you and I know that means they have to comprehend it too in order to read a book. Genre. Some students thrive better in one genre over another, and whether or not they have background knowledge. They might be amazing at some nonfiction books because they've studied a lot, but I can't say that they're going to be amazing at all nonfiction books. And you also pointed out the need to make sure, I saw over and over again through your posts, how we need to be collaborating on a student. Collaborating with all the people who currently work with that student, with all the people who formerly worked with that student, and with the parents. So many of you pointed out that you found really innovative ways to reach out and engage parents in helping them do book talks at home, helping them understand the books that you're sending home for students, why the parent might find that book to be too easy or too hard, and we need some way to justify to parents why we've chosen that book and why we're sending it home. So that might mean you might need to have a formula letter where you explain at the beginning of the year, this is how I pick just right books, this is the type of books you should expect your child to be seeing at home. I always, in book bins, like to see that students have some independent reads and some stretch reads. Especially because I work with students with disabilities. So I want their independent reads to be books that they can decode and understand on their own. And then the stretch reads are usually books that they could understand if I read it to them because their comprehension is there, but they're not able to decode it on their own, or vice versa. They can read it, but they don't get it. And so we're working on comprehension strategies together when we read that book. So parents might be confused why a 5th grader is coming home with a level B book and a level J book on audio, because we're working in two areas. We're working on their decoding here and working on their comprehension here. I loved hearing your solutions for some of the issues that Vanessa's story brought up. Some of you mentioned how you like to do read aloud with accountable talk, where you have a novel that you're reading aloud to your students and you model the strategies that you're using to track your thinking, to use strategies to problem solve when you come across tricky words or when something doesn't make sense. So you're actually modeling that in a full-length book, which is exactly what our students need, right? Several of you mentioned the stop and jot strategy, because if we're reading a long book and we put it down overnight, it's like Etch-a-Sketch, right? My brain, I forgot what I was reading about. But if we use sticky notes and put little stop and jots to track our thinking, then if we want to review, we can just look at our stop and jots. Oh yeah, that's right. That's what this was about. Okay, that's what I was thinking yesterday, and I'm going to pick up right where my brain left off. So stop and jot, whether it's sticky notes in a book or a graphic organizer or writing in your notebook, these are great ways for students to track and make their thinking visual for themselves and for us to know what they're thinking. And several of you talked about conferring, which is a huge learning target for this course with you, is I want to get you into a really comfortable conferring practice with your students. Whisper conferring, or just independent conferring with a student, where you have them bring their book to you and talk about what they're reading and what's making sense. Right then, I would know whether the book was a just right book or not, just hearing them talk about their book and what's making sense to them. So let's take a look at what you're going to read this week, because I'm really excited for you to finally get into part 2. It looks scary because it's pages 40 through 115, but you're not going to read all of those pages, okay? We're going to skim a few of them. Several of them you'll need to close read, and several of them you just need to know exist so you can go back to them later. It starts with a crash course in the elements of fiction: plot, setting, character, just to brush up our skills as educators, making sure we understand what all those elements of fiction entail. Then comes the really exciting part. This is my favorite part. It starts with level J. which I know isn't super friendly for our kindergarten and our primary teachers who teach, kindergarten through second grade, because I doubt you're having a lot of level J readers at that level. But I want you to know this exists. It starts at level J here, and it tells me the main things I can expect out of a level J book in terms of what are some features of plot and setting at all level J books, what are some features of characters, vocabulary and figurative language, themes and ideas, and then examples of books at level J. This is why I can go ahead and confer with any kid, even though I've never read their book. I'd be like, okay, sweetheart, what book are you reading? Oh, you're reading the Katie Woo series. Oh, great, just give me a minute. And I'll quick skim this page, and I know what that child should be able to talk about and explain to me about this level J book. And if they can't do these things, that tells me this is not a right fit book for them. Perhaps they're just word calling, but they're not understanding it. So this will go levels J through, through W. Okay, so that's a good chunk of the book that you can skim and just take a look at. I'm sorry, primary teachers, levels A through K, we tend to look more at decoding strategies at those levels, not necessarily like elements of fiction that students should be able to discuss at those levels, which is really sad, but maybe they'll extend it down at some point. I have other things I can share with you for levels A through K at a different time. But for our primary teachers, you'll be excited because the focus of our Ellery, our creative, the videos that you all are watching by Valerie Ellery, this week the focus will be on the primary grades, and we'll be looking at vocabulary, fluency, and comprehension for the primary grades, which if you teach upper elementary grades, you can still learn a lot from watching these videos that you could maybe make developmentally appropriate and bring up to your upper elementary kids. But in general, I want you to have a breadth of knowledge of what some actual classroom strategies could look like. This week is primary. In 2 weeks, we'll start to look at some intermediate grade levels. So if you teach higher grade levels, just hold on. Then the last section that you're going to read after we get through level W in your Understanding Text and Readers book is we're going to start looking at, this is really exciting, a progression of skills for each of the elements of fiction. So we get to look at, for example, the ability to retell important events, what that should look like at a level J, how it transfers to a level O, what it looks like at a level R and beyond. So when we shouldn't have to retain Vanessa's. It shouldn't matter what grade level they're in. If we're doing responsive teaching, we look at this progression of skills, we figure out the just right book, and we work with her where she's at, responsively, in workshop model. And you'd be hard-pressed to find a school in the United States right now that's not using the workshop model, because that's current best practice that we know works best for kids, that we can workshop their skills at the level that they are reading. So we've got progression of skills for plot and setting, and we have actual student handwriting and responses to questions, what we can expect from a student at that level. I think this is really exciting. Character progression of skills. These are all the things that I like to have handy when I confer with students so that I can read any book with them. So your discussion post this week, it's discussion number 3. And the prompt is very general. It's based on your reading of part 2 and the videos you're watching this week. You're going to share your writer's notebook. And the 4 questions again are, what was something that you already knew but was reinforced through our resources this week? Because I'm a professional and I like to hooray when I recognize stuff that I already knew. Number 2, what's something that got you really excited or curious, something you might want to try or look into more? Number 3, can you connect something you learned this week to a current or former student? Making those connections like you all are doing in your discussion posts is really anchoring this learning into your brain because you're making it real. Number 4, what is something you learned this week that you can't wait to share with your colleagues? I imagine that all of you are just like pounding down doors wanting to tell people about some of the cool stuff, like you want to talk about Vanessa and what you learned last week, and your wonderful thoughts on balanced literacy. So what is it that you can't wait to tell your teaching partner that you learned this week? So answer as many of those questions as you can. If you can't answer all of them, that's fine, but do your best. And I will look forward to seeing your wonderful ideas in the discussion posts. All right, have a great week. Bye.